So we're going to start off taking a look at MochaBlend Cinema 4D. It's a new product from Good Spirit Graphics. There was previously a Blender version, but that was a little limited in what it did in the tracking area for solving. So I created a Cinema 4D version that takes advantage of a lot of the features Cinema 4D has. So we're going to look over that version right now. And I'd also like to say at the end of the seminar, there's also going to be a 20% off sale that will start after the webinar is over. And you can use this code either at the Imagineer store or at Good Spirit Graphics. And Good Spirit Graphics has an e-store here, and I'd like to point out, just for anyone on a licensed server, you can go to my website and click on Store in the upper right. Make sure you check out the licensed server version. This is necessary to run floating licenses on Cinema 4D. If you don't have that, then you want to just get the single license version either here or at the Imagineer System Store. Also, if you want to get a bundled upgrade, you need to buy that from the Imagineer store, not from me. I only sell a single license of MochaBlend on my store. Now, next up, we have Cinema 4D here, where MochaBlend runs as a plugin inside Cinema 4D as a panel that you can put anywhere you want. It's organized into different sections here that let you work very smoothly. You move generally down from top to bottom when you're working in here. So at the top, we have a view screen that gives you information about your Mocha data. It gives you controls for a camera rig that you can create. And then all the objects that you create are organized into columns here: transform objects, corner pin objects, spline objects, and camera solve objects. And we'll go over some of this when we create a shot. And for a shot, we're going to start off with this simple shot here of a boxer punching a bag. We want to try to create some motion as his right arm moves forward and punches the bag, and we want to do it in 3D. So the first thing you want to do whenever you work on a shot like this is to analyze the area that you're tracking and see if there is any perspective shift in it. That changes how you actually track it in Mocha. If there is no perspective shift, we would track it with only translation, scale, and rotation. But if the area that you're tracking is actually changing perspective, and this one's kind of a close call, it looks like there is a little perspective change because his glove is not moving directly at the camera. You're going to track it for MochaBlend's 3D solver with all the options selected here, from translation all the way down to perspective. Now, the second important thing to look at is we're tracking planes in Mocha, and for MochaBlend to get a good solve on something like this, you want something that is rigid. If it is for example, a boxing glove in this case, that is really deforming a lot when he punches the thing, if we try to track a large area on here, we're going to get some distortion in the shape of the object. So what we want to look at is an area that is really not deforming too much. And it looks to me like if we pick this area here, it doesn't appear to be deforming like the red part is and like this little black oval is. So if we were to come along here and move along the edges of this, we'll move across the red outline because we want to give Mocha some contrast. It helps its tracker. So we want to get the gray versus the black edge and the gray versus the red edge here. And then at this point, we want to turn on perspective because we do have a little perspective shift in here. And we should just be able to, at this point, track forwards. And we'll turn on our surface area to see if it's roughly following. Okay, it looks like we can get a better view on this if we actually just grab our surface area and make it match the shape of this little gray area here. And then we'll just scrub the timeline and see if that's roughly following it. That looks pretty good. Okay. Now, one thing you don't want to do is track across the glove and the arm in this case. You can see the glove really tilts up. It's not rigidly connected to his arm. So if you have shots like this where you have a rigid area and an area that is not directly connected to it, don't draw your spline like across his arm and think you're going to get a good track. That will really distort the solve inside MochaBlend. So let's see, instead of tracking the rest of this here, let's just go ahead and look at the layer that I already tracked here. And you'll see I outlined roughly the same area. and it looks like our blue surface area is sticking nicely right on the glove. All right, very good. That's all we need to do our solve. Let's go ahead and export the tracking data. We'll select MochaBlend tracking data and copy this to the clipboard. The MochaBlend tracking data exporter is available in Mocha Pro and Mocha Plus versions 4.1.3 and above. Above will be when the next version of Mocha comes out. If you're using an earlier version of Mocha, there's another way to export, but you're better off using these exporters. They work a little more smoothly. Now let's go into Cinema 4D, and in MochaBlend what we have are data slots where we can put our tracking data in. All we do is pick an empty one here, select it, and paste our Mocha data in. Here is our layer name from Mocha, and you'll see we get a couple of warning messages. The first one just tells us that the format between the Mocha data and Cinema 4D is mismatched. So we solve that by clicking on Import Format. And then it tells us, well, we need a camera rig to create anything. So we will create a rig, and you can see our MochaBlend rig is right here. Now at this point we need to go ahead and load in our footage. So let's see, let's go to where we've stored up our footage. Now I'm going to do this off screen so it doesn't get in the way, but all I'm doing is grabbing the first image in an image sequence and dropping it in this little view area here. When I do, it will pop up on the rig movie screen. And for this shot, let's go ahead and make the movie screen not transparent so we can see it a little better. We'll also turn on display constant shading. That way when we rotate around in here, we don't get any lighting effects. We don't really want them for this. Now for this shot, we want to create some motion. Now there's two ways to do this. We can start off with the 2.5D solver, which is the non-perspective solver. And if we go back to Mocha, you'll see we track this with everything. Now I told you need to track it with everything if you have a perspective shift. Now does that mean you can't use the 2.5D solver? It says 0% here, which is telling you that you have perspective data in here. That doesn't mean we can't use it. So let's just go ahead and see what happens if we click on Transform Null. And let's push our movie screen background back. And let's click Set Timeline to Data. That will take our timeline frame range here from Mocha and move it into Cinema 4D. That's why we don't see a motion trail here. So if we click on Set Timeline to Data, Cinema 4D now has our full data export frame range. And if we move around here, you'll see we have a plausible motion path even without using the perspective solver. If we look through the camera, you'll see that if we scrub the timeline, that it is tracking his arm nicely. He hits the bag, and then it kind of curves around like that. Now, we could just stop right here and say, okay, that's a believable motion path. If we want to attach something there, attach an effect to it, we have a decent 3D motion path here. Now, is it perfectly accurate? Probably not, because we did have some perspective shift. So the other thing we can do is switch to the 3D solver, either clicking up here, which is really just a shortcut for this little radio button group here. We have the 2D mode, which will create a 2D tracker like this. This is just a standard two-dimensional movement like you would get if you exported some transform data to Cinema 4D. But MochaBlend lets you make it part of a rig, so you have some advantages doing it this way instead of the old school way. The second method is the 2.5D method, which we showed you. And then for perspective data, we will click on 3D. Now for 3D, let's see, we need to go ahead on this example, open up the geometry editor and click on Auto, and that will tell MochaBlend what the shape of this object is if it were facing right at the camera. We'll just close this out and click on Solve. Now it looks like we have a decent solve here. We can double check it by opening up the graph editor. As long as we have a line around here without a lot of crazy spikes in here, this should work fine. So let's go ahead and deselect that so we don't get confused, and we'll create one more, this time with 3D selected. And you'll see we have a 3D path here. This one is probably going to be more accurate because it will correct for the perspective. And once again, if we look through the camera, you'll see that it is also tracking the glove, moving forward, and then kind of curving around. So there's a simple shot, different ways to do it, and I want to point out that little trick of testing out the non-perspective solver first, just in case you don't get a good solve with the 3D solver. Now let's look at another example here.
Hey, Chris, but while you're
Yes.
loading that up, I just
Yes.
thought we could take a moment to chat and say hello. And yeah,
Sure.
this is Ross from Imagineer, and I thought I would just kind of review a couple quick questions.
Sure.
First of all, a couple people have asked, will this work with Cinema 4D Lite? And I just wanted to confirm with you that Cinema 4D Lite does not support plugins, so we're really MochaBlend Cinema 4D supports the full version of C4D.
Yes, that is a very important question because we're trying to get Maxon to OK plugins in the light version, and maybe if we get enough requests from everybody, Maxon might change their mind. But right now, nobody's plugins work in Cinema 4D Lite.
Right. Okay. So, and then the other question for support is people are, we've already discussed that you need MochaBlend exporter from Mocha from versions 4.13, which will work,
Right.
which is found in the newest versions of Mocha Pro or Mocha Plus. But
Right.
you do have a workflow for people who just want to test this out, or people who don't have Mocha Pro or Mocha Plus that just are using the free bundled Mocha AE, which there's certainly a lot of those people. Their question is how they can work with it, and I believe that your tracking data does support that as well, correct?
Yes, exactly. So everything I've showed you here, you can do in the bundled version of After Effects. And in that case, you would export the tracking data. But instead of selecting this exporter, which you won't see in your version, you would just simply go down to the After Effects corner pin supports motion blur. If you select that, MochaBlend can read that, and you can do everything you want for tracking data. Shape data is a little more complex if you're using the After Effects version, but if you're using a Mocha V3, for example, and you want to move shape data, MochaBlend will also read the Nuke RotoPaint format. So if you're in Mocha Pro V3 and you don't have V4, instead of the shape data exporter, for example, you would just go down to Nuke RotoPaint, and then MochaBlend will read that.
Right. So, and just kind of reiterate, so MochaBlend works with a lot of flavors of Mocha, which is very cool. And then people who are looking for like the sort of the lowest entry point into this, obviously they would buy the MochaBlend plugin, and then they could either use it with Mocha AE plugin, and if they want more functionality, then they could upgrade to Mocha Plus or Mocha Pro. So we're kind of trying to have flexible workflow for all the varieties there.
Exactly. And if you do want to upgrade to get extra features, for example, that you would get in the workflow with Mocha Pro or Mocha Plus, the Imagineer System Store has a bundled version of MochaBlend again, and you would want to purchase it from the Imagineer Store because you could get an upgrade from your After Effects version and also get MochaBlend at the same time for a discounted price.
Exactly. That's very cool. So a couple other quick questions that people ask, and we can move on. Someone asked, and I'm not sure if you're going to show this, but I believe that MochaBlend also works with the camera solver, 3D camera solver found in Mocha Plus or Mocha Pro. That's correct?
Yeah, if we have time at the end, I could show a quick example of that. It will take Mocha's camera solve data and bring it into Cinema 4D in a more flexible way, and it will let you do things that if you try to export, using FBX is a little finicky sometimes, so you're better off using MochaBlend for that. It will read the Mocha camera solve export, and that would be found in, for example, Mocha Pro, and I think Mocha Plus has that, Ross, the camera solver.
Yes, Mocha Plus and Mocha Pro both have the camera solver.
The camera solver, yeah, so you would go down to the camera solve tab, export your camera data here, and use the After Effects format, and MochaBlend will read that. So I'll try to see if we have time at the end to throw up a quick example of that.
Okay, cool. I have some more questions, but I think just for flow here, why don't we move on to the next example, and then I'll interrupt you again after that one, okay?
Sure, yeah, that's great.
Okay.
I mean, go ahead and break the flow after each example if you want.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay, let's see. Next up, let's take a look at another project here. Let's see. Let's take a look at this shot here. Okay. Here we have a rally car that's moving through the desert, and I'll go ahead and turn this off for a second here. We can scrub through the timeline. You'll see we have a shot that looks pretty difficult here to track if we want to get the side of the car and attach something to it, or throw a particle system on or something like that. We have a lot of dust. The car is really kind of bouncing around. At first glance, it looks like this might be a difficult track, but I've already saved you some time and tracked it ahead of time by just drawing a spline around this whole side of the car. And although it doesn't capture a perfect plane on all sides of the car, MochaBlend, Mocha actually, I should say, does an excellent job of tracking this. Let's go ahead and open this up and select the car track layer. And by putting the surface area and our paint grid here on, we want to look at it and see if it kind of deforms along with the perspective shift of the car. And this looks pretty good. This is the power of Mocha. Drawing a spline around and getting an excellent track on a shot like this is no small task. So with this already tracked, let's just go ahead and move over to MochaBlend in Cinema 4D by going back to the Track tab and selecting Export Tracking Data. MochaBlend Tracking Data, very good. And we'll go back to Cinema 4D. Now we always want to start a new document inside Cinema 4D, so let's open one up. And then we want to either overwrite our slot, but you don't have to because MochaBlend will store up lots of Mocha exports. And in fact, if I go very quickly here, it will store up to, let's see, let's just go ahead and select all. You can store up to 50 exports from Mocha. So one of the nice features is if you have a lot of shots or a lot of things in one shot with different tracks and splines, you don't have to keep re-exporting every time you want to try something new. You just load them all up into empty data slots here in MochaBlend, and they will live in here indefinitely until you clear them out. So you could export a bunch of shots and then work for a week without even going back to Mocha. So let's go switch back to slot range 1 to 10, pick an empty slot here, and paste in our data. All right, here's our car track from Mocha. And again, we do the same thing. We import the format, create a rig, set the timeline to match the data, and then we go hunt down the image sequence here. Let's see where it is. In this case, it's going to be right in here. Now we just pick up the first image in the sequence or video file, drop it in this little camera view area here, and you'll see we have our rally car footage here. Okay, here we go. Now in this case, we can do the same thing we did before. I always like to create a 2.5D non-perspective track first, even though it's going to tell you 0% quality. It's telling you that because we tracked this again in Mocha with everything selected here. That doesn't mean you can't use it even though it has 0% here. It's just warning you basically. So let's click on Transform Null, and you'll see we have again a plausible motion path. This looks pretty good actually. Now let's look through the camera by clicking on this little button here, and we're looking through our rig cam now. And another thing I like to do is push my movie screen back by clicking on this button. What this is going to do is push the movie screen back off the rig, and we have the freedom of putting it anywhere we want. So we can just push it way back like this, put it way back behind the entire motion path, and we can also make it so it isn't transparent again. Now if we look through our rig, we'll see that MochaBlend has still aligned everything perfectly. So if we look at the little center of the axes here, you'll see it is tracking the center of the car just like it did in Mocha. Okay, it looks like it's following the car nicely. Now what we don't get with the non-perspective tracker is if you look carefully, you'll see that these axes are not rotating. We don't get any rotation with non-perspective solver. All we get is a motion path. Now if we want to get something that is actually changing its rotation along with the car, we will need to switch to the 3D solver, go down to the Solve tab, and here it says Unsolved. Now in this case, we set a frame in Mocha to tell MochaBlend what the shape of this tracked area is. Now let's go back to Mocha just for a second, and what MochaBlend is asking is, look at the little blue surface area here. It needs to know, well, what is the shape of this blue surface area if it were facing directly at the camera? And from that, it's going to calculate a solve. Now, on the first frame of this sequence, it's not facing directly at the camera. In other words, the car side is not facing directly perpendicular to the camera image plane, but it's close enough that we can kind of cheat on this one. And when we drew our spline, what Mocha does is it creates a surface area with perfect 90-degree angles in the corners, so it is in effect facing right at the camera. MochaBlend has identified, I think it's identified this frame here. This is 88. Let's go back to Cinema 4D, and it looks like it comes through as 89, probably due to the project settings, or that could have been the frame it was drawn on. Either way, with auto on, we don't have to go into the geometry editor like we did with the punching glove. So all we need to do is click on Solve. And again, we can look at the solve quality. You can see at the end, when the car gets really far away, it looks like the solve quality goes down quite a bit. That's okay. That doesn't mean we can't use it. It's so far off in the distance that you probably won't notice anything. And the rest of it looks really good here. So let's go ahead and close this out. And we can also apply it to this motion track so you can see the difference as it shifts. Instead of creating a new null, we'll go ahead and click Apply, and now it will move the 3D solve onto this existing null. So if we click on that, you can see we also have a motion path here. And let's see, in this example, I had object position only. Well, we don't really want the object position only. We have no rotation. So let's go ahead and click on Full Solve. Find the focal length and solve it one more time. Probably actually get a better solve that way. And then we'll just update our path. There we go. Now we should have rotation in our null here. Now let's see. Let's go ahead and look through this portion of it. And you'll see, now look at the axes here. They're going to track the side of the car. Now if we wanted to add something onto that car, all we would do is, for example, create an object. Move out of camera view so you can see what's going on here. We'll parent it to the transform. And then we'll zero out the origin settings for that cube, so it'll move to our little null here. And then there's one important point. We are solving for planes in Mocha, right? So if you place an object on a tracking null, what you really want to do is we'll make the cube editable, and we'll move the origin point of the cube to the edge of the object, like this. And then let's go ahead and zero out the origin settings again. Now what we've done is we've moved our object right to this. Now this is the plane that we've solved inside Mocha. And what you want is your object to be you want it to stick on that plane. You don't want to place that plane in the middle of an object because that's not really what we're solving for. This would represent the side of the car here. So now if we look through our camera, and let's see, let's go ahead and cheat a little bit because it wasn't facing right at the camera. We'll go ahead and rotate our cube a little bit just to match the side of the car. And let's go ahead and scale it a little bit. And because we moved the origin, it's going to scale and not move its position relative to that plane. In other words, it'll still be sitting right on that little null there. Okay, now if we move through our shot, you can see I have it sticking out quite a lot. But you can see as it moves through our shot, it is maintaining its proper rotation along with the car. Now this is a little bit of a tough shot here, and you may find an area in your shot where you lose your rotation a little bit. See how it's kind of moving back and forth here? This can be solved just with a few manual keyframes. I won't go through the whole process, but basically what you would do is exaggerate the motion by selecting like a face on here. Let's turn off the axis and turn on this. Let's go ahead and grab that and move it way out. Now, if you exaggerate the size of this relative to where the plane is, what you're going to see is an exaggerated rotation error. See how much that's moving. Now, for most of the shot through here, it's going to be fine. Now, when you get to an area that isn't so great, all you would do is select your transform, go into rotation mode, and then just move it down into place, preferably with auto key on, so it will save that position. We're basically overriding our solve with a little manual keyframe correction here. Now, again, the reason we extruded this way out is because if we make a little rotation change here, and then grab this and push it way back in the way your final shot will be, we're basically compressing all that little visual error, so you don't have to rotate it perfectly into position. It will look proper for the shot, and the little error that your eye is creating will be corrected. Now let's go ahead and look at the final shot where I threw a few keyframes in to correct that. Let's see if we fixed it all. Let's see, recent files. Let's go to rally car. And let's turn on, okay, here we go. So here we have the cube. I used that little keyframe technique with the extruded side of the cube. And if we go through our shot, you'll see we're not having those rotation issues. So even if you can't get a perfect solve right out of the gate, maybe you can't track the object perfectly in Mocha, you still have the option of correcting a few frames where it's off. This looks like a positive, a good track to me and a good 3D solve. Okay, there you go. Any questions, Ross?
No, I don't. Well, let me see. What percentage would you consider poor solve and solve quality parameters when you were analyzing the solve data?
Anything from 80 to 100 is going to be good for the 3D solver. It's a little different scale if you're doing the 2.5D solver, but it really is going to show gross errors that are in the Mocha track. Like if you go to Mocha and you're looking at your solve and the little blue corners of your surface area are really jumping around, that's going to show up pretty dramatically in your solve quality inside MochaBlend. So you can show up with a decent solve quality here, but still have a couple of rotation frames where it can't get it. Like in this case, we had a good motion path. If I go ahead and click on the transform here, this looks like a good path, but sometimes you might get a little rotation that doesn't look right to you. That's where you could just throw a couple keyframes in and fix it.
Yeah, someone actually just asked a question, which I think I actually have the answer to in some ways was, is there a way to improve the error rate? And you know, Mocha itself does have the adjust track and there's lots of techniques that the user might use to actually, before they send the data to MochaBlend, that you want to make sure that your surface track in Mocha is really good. And there's lots and lots of tutorials and techniques, including the adjust track module, which are going to help you nail the really difficult you know, planar tracks in Mocha. I would also just say too, just from my perspective as someone who's, you know, helped design Mocha, been using it for years, you know, I want to, you know, kind of iterate for the users if you're not fully getting it, is that Chris is actually taking a one surface planar track and projecting this into 3D space. So for a workflow, it's actually quite unique and also incredibly fast, especially on a moving solve like this, which might take a lot more time to get an accurate track in a full-blown 3D camera solving application. So I think that I just wanted to point out that you know, it's kind of a really unique workflow that Chris has come up here with, using Mocha's 2D or 2.5D data and getting this 3D, you know, getting it into 3D space. So I definitely applaud you on that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. As far as I know, there's no other way to really do this sort of thing other than using Mocha and MochaBlend. We're working with very little data, and frequently you may try to do this as an object solve in a full-blown solver, and you might not be able to get a good result. One thing you have a big advantage with in this workflow is if you can get this blue area to stick, the center of the blue area is your tracking data export, right? So as long as this sticks here, you're not going to get any slippage in here, because what MochaBlend is doing is it is actually using the center of that area that we tracked in Mocha and it will be rock solid with your footage. So in conventional solvers, you always get some kind of slippage with the error. If you show several pixels of error or even close to 1, you'll see some jitter in your 3D solvers with some of the conventional solvers, programs like Boujou, things like that. Here you won't get that because I'm correcting that actually out. So it will stick pixel perfect with what you see in Mocha. All you would really need to do is, like Ross says, go here and use the adjust track module here to maybe make sure these little blue corners are sticking right on the area that you want. That is most of the area you're going to get in MochaBlend. If this is sticking rock solid, you're probably going to get a good solve in MochaBlend.
Yeah, so that adjust track tool could definitely be your friend, and someone just asked about that again. So yeah, the adjust track is going to help the solve. A couple, actually, people have asked this persistently, so I just asked, we could really quickly talk about this. People are asking about stereoscopic workflow. Will this work with a Cinema 4D stereo camera?
Okay,
And
well, let's take a look at an example of that right now.
Okay, cool. As you bring that up, I'll also just, as you're loading that project, I'll just mention that a lot of people don't know, but in Mocha Pro 4, one of the main features was the ability to track stereo imagery as well. So I'm not, that is, footage shot with 2 cameras in full-blown stereo, and so that we have some great tutorials on the Imagineer website about that.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking forward to hopefully working with someone with some examples of using that stereo workflow where we could export the data from the 2 cameras separately into 2 different, let's see, we would just go into Cinema 4D and pick 2 slots, export it separately, and maybe even create 2 rigs depending on the workflow. There's probably a path to do it. I haven't fully worked it out with the stereo version, but we can take a look at a quick example here of something you might turn into a camera, I should say a 3D conversion type shot. So let's go ahead and scrub through here. This was a scene that from the Mocha folks that was originally used for a camera solve. And you'll see if we turn this down, what they did is they tracked like a couple of different areas here. Let's turn on our surface area here. And they did a camera solve inside Mocha here. Now we're not going to use it as a camera solve. I'm using it as an example for something else. So let's go ahead and just use the roto that they did here. We'll select one roto layer. And what we're interested in is mainly the girl on the horse. But we're going to use the rest of this here to create a little Z-depth 3D conversion type shot. So let's export all these roto layers here and go to the Track tab and export shape data this time. MochaBlend shape data export, copy to clipboard. But I made a mistake, so before I move on, let's catch it. Export shape data. By default, it has selected layer. We don't want selected layer. We want all the visible layers. So let's switch over to this and copy to clipboard.
So Chris, in this example, you're actually focusing on Mocha tracked roto splines as opposed to track data. Now we're thinking more about the spline data.
Exactly. We're going to create animated camera maps inside Cinema 4D from this roto data here. So with all those copied to the clipboard, let's go ahead and go back to Cinema 4D. And I have a lot of things on my desktop there. Okay, let's move to here, create a new file inside Cinema 4D, and we'll go to a new empty slot. We'll paste in our shape data this time. Okay, there's our layer name. It took the first one in the stack, the top of the stack, front foliage. We'll import the format, create another rig. Let's go ahead and set the timeline to match the data, and then I'm going to go hunt down where this footage is. Let's see. I think it is in here. Okay, it is not there. It is in Mocha Demos. Let's go to here. Fantasy Medieval Girl. Here we go. Okay, here's the image sequence. So let's just grab the first one in the sequence and drop it into the camera view area. And we'll go ahead once again and change this from transparent. You don't really have to change this every time. If you set this once without a rig created, it will save that setting. I leave it on transparent because roughly half the time I want it to be transparent. But if you set this to 0 before you create your rig, you will always get the image popping up without transparency. So what we do now is we go down to the Spline tab here. And actually, let's scrub the timeline and make sure the background's working. Yeah. Okay. On the Spline tab, we're going to select Filled as our spline type and make sure we have camera map layers selected. So what we're going to do with hidden splines, I won't go into that too much, but it basically hides the extruded edges in case you want to add depth to them. We're not going to have any depth to the extrusion in this example. We will just click on Create Splines. Very simple, and it looks like nothing has changed. But if we highlight over areas, we'll see that we have splines from every Mocha layer. If we turn off our movie screen by clicking on this eye icon, you'll see what we have created is an animated set of geometry here. Now we can space this out in camera Z depth. Right now it's simply two-dimensional. Now the way we're going to do that is to move over to MochaBlend's camera map editor. And you'll see what we get here is a way to move these layers into 3D space. And let me briefly explain what we're looking at before I go any further. This profile view here is a left camera view in Cinema 4D. So if we were to rotate the viewport like this, this is our movie screen, which is here, and our camera, which is invisible by default. We'll make it visible for this example. You'll see our camera is right here. This is our camera. So now we can move these layers anywhere we want in this zone here. So let's go ahead and click on Display Constant Shading. That way we can see the background. We don't get Cinema 4D's 3D lighting effects. And let's go ahead and lay out these layers here. Now everything's red because one of the layer colors set in Mocha had red on everything. We can click on this little color icon and actually get the colors we set in Mocha. And if you set up things by color groups, you can move things around a lot more easily here. For example, if I select a white color, it will take all the white layers as one group. So now looking at it, let's go ahead and quickly lay out a couple things. Let's turn on these names here. Looks like this is probably front foliage, is probably, maybe this one is the closest one. Let's just grab this, move it out in the middle of this range here, and maybe take the front foliage, put it almost at the same level. Let's take the mid-ground foliage, move it about here, because we want to make the girl move through the shot and end up going in between these two layers. She roughly goes in between this and this. Now if we go back a little bit, we looks like our mid-ground hills are going to be the furthest back, so we can leave these where they are. And then we're going to have, let's see, the left ridge. That looks like it starts out roughly maybe a little bit in front of her. So let's grab this, move it about here. And then we have, let's, I think that's pretty much it, isn't it? Okay, now let's select her. And we're going to start her off in this area, right on the movie screen. And with all the layers selected, we'll just go ahead and add a keyframe. Now, MochaBlend could also make this move according to tracking data, and I have a tutorial up on there with my hand moving in camera Z depth to show you how to do that. But we didn't track anything here, and I wanted to show you this because you can't always get a good track on a shot like this where someone's bouncing up and down on a horse. You might not be able to get a good 3D solve inside MochaBlend Solver. So we're going to hand animate it here simply by grabbing this whole layer here and moving to the last frame on the timeline here. And we want her to end up in between these two layers here. So we're going to use our little gizmo here to grab all these layers and move them as a group, and we'll position them right in between these two layers. We'll add a keyframe, and now you'll see if we go through the timeline here, she is moving from this point to here, roughly matching what she does in the original footage. And let's see, mid-ground hills. We did not move mid-ground hills, did we? I noticed that because the little modified flag is not on for mid-ground hills. That's in the background. That's right on the movie screen. That's why it's not modified. So we're not going to actually be changing the position of that. Now let's just move this down. and go ahead and click on Update Modified. Now what MochaBlend is going to do is process each layer, recalculate all the spline data, and move it into 3D Z-depth here. If we turn on our camera background and look through our camera, you'll see, let's go ahead and close this down, you'll see that everything lines up pixel perfect with the original footage. You can't see that we have any kind of movement in Z-depth of these objects because MochaBlend has already made all the necessary adjustments so it matches up perfectly. But what's actually happening is, if you look at her on her horse, she's moving in between these two footage layers here, which are the foliage, and she starts off way back here. There you go. Now at this point, what we could do is, I just pushed our movie screen background back a little bit here just to get it out of the way so you can see where the layers are. At this point, if you want to attach something to her, let's say you want to attach something to her head, for example, like maybe put something in the scene, like a fairy floating around, something like that. We could go ahead and select her head and click on this little button here, which will make the motion path of her head through 3D space visible. This gives us a moving target where we can attach anything to, like a light or a fairy or something that's moving around, maybe create some real 3D lighting effects by simply parenting things to this, maybe adding another null with some rotation on it. And because that would take a little too long for the webinar, let's go ahead and open up that final file and take a look at that. That's going to be this one here. And I think with everything on, you'll see I've added a little forest fairy, which is really just Cinema 4D's figure here. But it is rotating around her and casting lighting effects on her. So you can see very quickly you can create some effects by moving things in 3D space, and as she gets closer, the figure gets bigger because we have real 3D movement here. We don't have to cheat anything. If we look at the camera view, you see the final shot, but if we zoom in on her, you'll see we have a real 3D layer here, moving in 3D space with a light and little figure moving around here. You might want to randomize the motion a little bit so it doesn't look quite so robotic, but in your final shot you could see you could have something moving maybe at different paths around her and using that tracking null I showed you as the center of the object. I also have a little light on her so you get real lighting effects, as you can see. Okay, there you go. Anything on that one, Ross?
Hey, Chris. No, I don't think we have any specific questions. I think some really nice comments, though. I think people are quite impressed, especially to see, that pretty unique depth, your interface, custom interface that you've built for splines and the camera and everything. And I just think it's so cool that, that you can change the depth of all these textured splines, and then the camera recalculates. And just having the ability to have this kind of data in the 3D space so quickly is I'm just really excited to see what kind of creative work people are going to do with this kind of workflow.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick because I didn't really show in this example here during the demo because I don't want to take up all the time on one shot, but you're not locked into any kind of focal length on your camera here. You can go to your camera rig and you can change the focal length on your camera. MochaBlend will make the necessary camera adjustments so the field of view matches, and then when you create your splines, you can have any kind of a field of view effect you want, even crash zooms, on your final 3D object that you put in the scene. So I tried to make it as flexible as possible, so no matter what the original footage was shot at, you can set any kind of focal length on it. MochaBlend will recalculate everything and make it match perfectly.
Yeah, that's super unique and really, really cool. I remember in the past, and probably we're not going to have time to do it here, but a lot of Mocha customers in the past years have used Mocha to assist with dimensionalizing or taking a 2D, a single camera shoot and converting it to stereo 3D. And I think you actually had an example where you used Mocha Pro's remove module to remove the background, to infill the background, and then kind of essentially creating a whole 3D stereo view out of a 2D shot.
Exactly. That's a really good workflow because with it was a shot of a deer walking along through a little field, and we wanted to actually pull the deer off the background. And whenever you do that in any kind of 3D conversion, no matter what process you use, you normally have to fill in the pixels along the edge of the deer. So when your camera shifts around, you don't see the original image on the footage. So Mocha's remove module is perfect for that kind of shot.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, very cool stuff. I think at this point we're getting down to the wire. So I don't know if you have one more example you want to show, or
Yeah, just quickly, let me show you, just because so many people have asked about it. Let's see, if I go ahead and click on this camera here, real quick also, uh, let's see, where is my camera? Here it is. There's an option in here of changing to a stereo camera here. So if you want to switch your camera to a stereo camera, for example, inside Cinema 4D, and play around with creating a 3D conversion with two rendered images out, let's see, go to symmetrical camera here. You'll see you do have the option of creating a stereo camera here. I'll zoom in on it so you can see it. And with a little edge pixel removal of the objects, you can probably turn this into a 3D conversion shot pretty easily.
yeah, exactly. And I think it'll be fun in the coming months as Mocha moves to supporting 360 equirectangular formats for VR, which is something that we're doing. I think that that will also be a really, really interesting workflow between the two. A quick question just came up, Chris, which is a Blender user is asking, and I'm sorry, I don't remember. Does the MochaBlend plugin for Blender have the spline workflow?
It does not. Unfortunately, currently, due to a couple of reasons, one is the interface inside Blender, and another is Blender's licensing. A lot of these features that are requiring other custom interfaces that I created for the Cinema 4D version, like this camera map editor, which was necessary actually to do any of this, it is not possible in Blender to do the workflow that I'm showing you here with moving the splines into different Z depths. That's a feature only of the Cinema 4D version. What you get in the Blender version is a real focus on the compositor and doing lots of advanced stabilization that you can't do in the Cinema 4D version, for example, because there is no compositor here.
Right. Okay, cool. So I guess that answers that question. Let me see if there's any other last questions. Well, someone has asked again, is there a version for Maya? People are always, when they see this, I've heard from many users saying, are you going to do something for Maya?
I currently have requests out for Maya, for 3ds Max, for Nuke, for Moto. Every time someone does, they say, okay, I need it for my software. I haven't committed to anything beyond Maya. I've already started working on the Maya version. I'm not sure everything is going to work in Maya yet, so I'm still in that learning stage because I custom designed this for Cinema 4D, so I got to make sure everything that Cinema 4D is letting me do I can also do in Maya. So at this point, I'm working on the Maya version. After that, we'll have to see how it goes.
Sure. Okay, cool. And I guess the very last question for you, Chris, before you talk about this example that you're showing, is, let's see, someone's saying, I'm wondering if MochaBlend does the same thing as a 3D camera solver export of FBX data to Cinema 4D, specifically the nulls in 3D space.
Okay, this is for the camera solver in Mocha? This
I
question?
assume that someone's asking, yeah, because Mocha does do a 3D camera solve to FBX, but this is quite different, isn't it? I mean, it's a different workflow.
Yeah, I found I had a little problem with the flexibility FBX gave you. If you use the exporter, the After Effects exporter inside Mocha, and take your camera solve from Mocha into MochaBlend, you're going to be able to create it, for example, with not just a regular camera, but with MochaBlend's rig. So MochaBlend's rig will take the place of the camera, and then you'll be able to combine things like splines and other tracking data that aren't part of the solve and do it in a way that gives you a lot more options. So even taking just a camera solve from Mocha, you're going to be better off using the MochaBlend plugin to do it than just using FBX.
Right. So I think that sort of answers a couple questions. Yeah, using MochaBlend, especially the way it builds the rigs, that can assist the camera solver.
Right. And also you can actually use MochaBlend's rig to join on with other 3D solves, things solved from other camera solvers. So if you're using a conventional solver, you can also merge MochaBlend's rig with it. I'll do a tutorial on that at some point, but it'll let you combine things with even other solvers in case you need to do set reconstruction and things where you need kind of a perfect 3D space created.
Right. I've helped customers with those kind of projects before where maybe a 3D solver was having an issue on certain kinds of track, maybe like the track markers on a huge set were out of focus, and we were able to get planar tracks from Mocha to assist other trackers. So I think that would be a really useful tutorial for people to see.
Right, okay.
Very last question for you, Chris, is people are really digging what they've seen, and people are saying, well, if this is version 1, are there any other things that you've been thinking about for future versions of the MochaBlend plugin?
Okay, well, first of all, I would say I suffer from insomnia. That's because I lay in bed dreaming up things that you can do with stuff like this, and they generally build. You think of one idea, and then after you create A and B, suddenly you get an idea for C because of A and B. So as I've been building these tools, I finally had to just put it on the market without everything I want to do on it. So yes, there are more tools, and generally there isn't a version 1, 2, 3 of MochaBlend. There's sort of one continuous version, and as long as you're kind of in the support period, you just get free upgrades. So as I add tools, you will always be able to update MochaBlend and get the new tools. And I'm pretty flexible on the period where you can do that. If you have support for a year and then you don't buy it for a year, you just buy support over again for, right now it's only $50. You could buy it after 2 years. You don't have to bring yourself up to date. You just renew your support and suddenly you can get all the new updates again and bring you up to speed.
Very cool. Yeah, and I assume as more people experiment and play with this new workflow, feature requests will come in and things like that as well, right?
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that users will actually feed me information, because some of these things, for example, this shot here that I got from Ghost Town Media here, David Torno over there was testing the beta version of MochaBlend, and when he created this shot, he took some roto of this woman running through the scene here, and I'll just quickly go ahead and export this, all visible layers. And I'm sure everyone's seen this already, is at the webinar here. This is turned into 3D geometry with a smoke simulation. And the way it was done is simply taking these layers here, and let's see, create rig, set timeline, and let's see, let's go ahead and click on, this is going to be in here. Right, this is this example here. I'm sure everyone's seen it with the woman running through the smoke. I'll just pop it open real quick so you can see. As she runs through a smoke simulation here. And the way this was created was by taking those layers, and I just need to grab the footage real quick. I think it's right here. Here we go. And dropping that in our rig here. And then going to the Create Splines button again, make sure we have camera map on, Create Splines. And we'll turn off our movie screen, and there you go. We have our animated camera mapping going here. So all we do is go to the camera map editor again. And in this example, I've already color-coded everything by body part. So it wasn't that hard to lay these out. All we did is take, for example, the hand layer here, and then draw that out, add some extrusion depth to it. I'll rush through this because we're running out of time on our webinar. And the little blue area shows you how much depth you've added to it. We'll take the little shoulder cowl, move it over a little bit, move her torso over, give that about 50 or maybe a little more, maybe 80 pixels of depth. Then grab all the, let's see, the foreground leg here, and we'll just position it slightly outside and then extrude that out, maybe about 40. Grab her neck. Now this workflow originally didn't exist because when I saw what David Torno did, he actually used this shot with tools that weren't quite so flexible in here. And when I saw what he did, I decided that it was way too much work. So I went back in here and changed the tools so you could actually set rotation of these planes and also set extrusion by doing things like, this is her left leg, so let's go ahead and match that to her foreground leg 40, not 440. And let's just grab finally her arm.
It's a great interface, Chris. You did a great job with this.
I appreciate it. I tried to make everything as easy as possible for people. So this made sense to me because it gives you a perfect Z-depth layout of all the layers. Her arm is 30. And we can also zoom in on this by just mouse scrolling in here too. So if we look at the layout of this, you can actually just drag in here and set the depth of the different layers in here by holding down Alt on Windows and set in the depth here. And at this level, you see everything is modified. So if we just move down here, we're not going to animate her position in Z-depth. We're just going to give her some Z-depth here in the real world. We'll click on Update Modified. MochaBlend will process every layer, and what you're seeing in the final result is not the original Mocha data. It's all set again to your camera focal length. You'll see we have our 3D geometry, and now we have animated 3D geometry. And what David Torno did is basically take this animated 3D geometry, which when viewed through the camera makes all this extrusion invisible. If you move this way, it looks exactly like the original footage. We turn our background on, which I like to do in a shot like this, because not every little fiber of her clothing is rotoed. But if you render it with the background on, you'll pick up all those little areas. You can see those don't need to be rotoed for the purpose of the simulation, but we can get a complete shot by leaving that background on. And then he just created a plane, something like this. And let's see, just like rotated it.
Here's her run through the plane.
Yeah, rotated it and then turned it into a like a source for a smoke simulation, for example, and then she just runs through that smoke simulation here like that.